1923. Germany is a graveyard for money. Hyperinflation has rendered the currency worthless. One loaf of bread costs 200 billion marks. Paper bills are everywhere, but they buy nothing. People don't use the money to shop. They burn it. Families shove stacks of banknotes into their stoves because paper is cheaper than firewood. The economy is a total ruin. Then came 1929. The Great Depression strikes a second blow. American loans stop. German banks collapse one by one. The machines in the factories go silent. By 1933, 6 million Germans have no jobs. This is 30% of the entire workforce. Men stand on street corners with signs. Children are starving in the gutters. This is the broken nation Adolf Hitler inherits in January 1933. The country was economically destroyed twice in 10 years, but only 6 years pass. 1939. The transformation is complete. Germany invades Poland. They bring 3 million soldiers, 3,000 tanks, 4,000 aircraft. This is the most modern military force on the European continent. In just 6 years, a bankrupt nation built the most powerful war machine in history. How did they pay for it? At first glance, a miracle, but in reality, a massive fraud. The answer involves a fake company, a financial wizard, and a national-scale Ponzi scheme. The mechanism was called MIFO bills. It was a shadow banking system. It funded Nazi rearmament while hiding the debt from the world. No one saw the numbers. No one saw the risk. The German government created a shell company to sign the checks. They printed billions in credit that did not officially exist. By 1939, the bills were coming due. The scam reached its limit. Germany did not have the money to pay its debts. The coffers were empty. Events accelerated. Germany had no choice but to invade its neighbors. They needed to seize foreign gold and resources to avoid immediate bankruptcy. The Nazi economy was not just built on ideology. It was a financial scam that required constant expansion to survive. If the army stopped, the banks would fail. This is how Hitler paid for World War II. Economic collapse made the invasion inevitable. The war was the only way to hide the bill. January 1939. The German economy sits on the edge of a total breakdown. Hjalmar Schacht, the top economist of the Third Reich, sees the data. He knows the gold reserves are gone. He knows Hitler has only one solution left: a war of plunder. This was the choice for the men in the room. They could speak up and face a firing squad, or stay silent and watch the world burn. Every option was a dead end. How did a modern industrial power reach this point? The answer lies in two separate catastrophes. November 1923. This was the peak of the Weimar hyperinflation. The numbers were impossible to track. One single US dollar was worth 4 trillion German marks. The currency was no longer money. It was just scrap paper. In the frame, workers hauling laundry baskets filled with banknotes. They demanded to be paid twice a day, once at noon and again at the end of the shift. Why such urgency? Because by 5 in the evening, the wages earned at 8 in the morning were worthless. The price of bread doubled during a single lunch break. The footage shows a chaotic scene inside a restaurant. Customers began their meals at one price and finished them at another. Waiters stood on chairs every 30 minutes to shout out the new menu costs. People ate as fast as possible to avoid the next price hike. The sound of printing presses ran 24 hours a day. But it wasn't enough. The social impact was absolute. Life insurance policies, paid into for 30 years, matured. The total payout could not buy a single postage stamp. The German middle class watched their life savings, their pensions, and their entire future vanish in a few months. This was not a standard recession. This was an economic apocalypse. At first glance, a temporary disaster, but in reality, the death of trust in democracy. Eventually, the chaos slowed. A new currency was issued. The marks were stabilized and the streets grew quiet. Life began to look normal again. But the trauma remained. Events accelerated. The calm would not last. October 24th, 1929. The New York Stock Exchange crashes. American banks begin calling in their loans immediately. In Germany, the flow of foreign capital stops. Businesses collapse by the thousands. Unemployment numbers explode. By 1932, 6 million Germans are out of work. This represents 30% of the entire workforce. The visual evidence of the crisis is everywhere. Families drag their furniture onto the sidewalk to auction it for food money. Men in suits wait in soup lines. Engineers and teachers beg for manual labor jobs on street corners. The Weimar government remains paralyzed. Violence becomes a daily routine. Communist and Nazi paramilitaries turn city centers into literal war zones. In just 14 years, Germany has been economically destroyed twice. This chaos creates the path for Adolf Hitler. He takes power in January 1933. His platform is clear. He promises to restore German greatness, rebuild the military, and tear up the Treaty of Versailles. But he faces a massive obstacle. Germany is bankrupt. The Versailles Treaty dictates strict limits: 100,000 soldiers, no tanks, no aircraft, no submarines, no heavy artillery. Even if Hitler ignored the rules, the treasury is empty. He needs to rearm the nation massively and secretly. He must do this before the international community can react. The problem seems impossible. How do you fund a world-class army with zero marks? At first glance, a dead end. But in reality, a financial loophole. Enter Hjalmar Schacht, born in 1877. He is a banker, an economist, and a financial strategist. Schacht is already a national legend. In 1923, he served as currency commissioner. He ended the hyperinflation crisis by creating the Rentenmark, a currency backed by agricultural land. It stopped the economic bleeding. March 17, 1933. Hitler appoints Schacht as president of the Reichsbank. By August 1934, Schacht is the Minister of Economics. His mission is specific. He must fund the production of weapons without triggering inflation or alerting foreign intelligence. Schacht has a plan. He understands the mechanics of the challenge. Hitler needs tanks, planes, and ships. This requires paying steel giants, chemical plants, and arms manufacturers. If the Reichsbank simply prints the cash, two things happen. First, inflation destroys the currency again. The German public will not tolerate a repeat of 1923. Second, the massive payments would appear on the national budget. The world would see the rearmament. Events accelerated. Schacht needed a ghost system to hide the money. There was no turning back. The official Reichsbank statements were public. Foreign governments analyzed these documents every month. If they saw a spike in military spending, they would know Germany was rearming. Britain and France would intervene before the German army was ready. Hitler needed invisible money. He required a currency that did not trigger inflation or appear on official balance sheets. Hjalmar Schacht found the solution. In 1934, Schacht established a new entity. The name on the documents was Metallurgische Forschungsgesellschaft, MBH. In English, this meant the Metallurgical Research Company, Limited Liability. History remembers it as MIFO. On paper, MIFO appeared to be a standard research consortium. 4 industrial giants held the shares: Siemens, Krupp, Rheinmetall, and Gute Hoffnungshütte. The company had a total capital of only 1 million Reichsmarks. This was a small amount for such large players. It looked harmless to an outside auditor. In reality, MIFO performed no research. It produced no goods. It was a shell company with nothing but a letterhead and a bank account. But this empty office was designed to fund the largest rearmament program in human history. How did the scheme function? Why did the industrial titans agree to it? The answer was a complex financial deception. At first glance, it was a regular business transaction, but in reality, it was a state-sponsored fraud. The process was mechanical. Imagine a German arms manufacturer in 1935. The government orders 1,000 tanks. Instead of paying in official Reichsmarks, the state issues MIFO bills. These were promissory notes. They functioned as I owe us from a fake company. The paper stated that MIFO would pay the full amount in 5 years, but a factory cannot wait 5 years. The owner needs immediate cash to pay 10,000 workers and purchase tons of raw steel. The manufacturer takes the MIFO bills to a private German bank. The bankers examine the paper. They know the company is a front, but they also know the Reichsbank stands behind it. This was the hidden guarantee. The bank accepts the bills and provides the cash. The manufacturer buys materials and builds the tanks. The transaction never touches the official government budget. No foreign spy sees the movement of money. The sound of factory presses intensified. The volume of steel production climbed. But on the official records of the Reichsbank, nothing changed. The debt was hidden in a mountain of private paper. Events accelerated. By 1939, the volume of MIFO bills reached 12 billion Reichsmarks. This was not just a clever trick. It was a financial time bomb. The era of invisible rearmament had arrived. The Reichsbank guarantees these bills. A private bank takes the paper and hands you cash, real Reichsmarks. You might lose a small percentage in fees, but the money is in your hand. You are satisfied. The payment is complete. Now the mechanics of the scheme begin. The private bank now holds the MIFO bills as assets. They deliver them to the Reichsbank. The central bank uses its power to print money and converts the bills into currency. One detail remains critical. These transactions never appear on the official Reichsbank balance sheet. The ledgers stay clean. MIFO bills are classified as private obligations. They are not recorded as government debt. They are not listed as Reichsbank liabilities. On paper, these are simply debts belonging to a private research firm. The footage from the era shows foreign diplomats reviewing German financial reports. They see nothing. The massive spending on tanks and planes remains invisible to the world. Between 1934 and 1938, the regime issued 12 billion Reichsmarks in MIFO bills. The scale was unprecedented. For context, Germany's entire national debt in 1932 was only 10 billion Reichsmarks. The math is clear. Germany secretly doubled its total national debt to fund the military. Outside observers remained blind to the scale of the buildup until the situation became irreversible. By 1936, the results were visible. Germany had violated every military restriction of the Versailles Treaty. The camera records the parades, panzer divisions, Luftwaffe squadrons, and a modernized infantry. The Allies did not intervene. They failed to realize how far the rearmament had progressed, but a problem emerged. MIFO bills carried a 5-year term. The first bills issued in 1934 would mature in 1939. Germany did not have 12 billion Reichsmarks in the treasury to settle the debt. The clock was ticking. The system shifted into a Ponzi scheme. The logic is simple. You promise investors high returns. You pay the early participants using cash from new recruits. The footage shows the gears turning. The cycle continues as long as new money flows into the system. But eventually, the flow stops. The pressure builds. There was no turning back. 12 billion Reichsmarks. That was the debt looming over the Third Reich in 1938. The state had run out of new investors. The scheme collapsed. Everyone loses. Nazi Germany's economy functioned like a classic pyramid. MIFO bills were the foundation. These were private promissory notes. The government used them to pay for rearmament without printing official currency. It was a promise to pay later. Germany planned to use future economic growth to settle the debt. But by 1938, the gears jammed. The German economy could not generate enough tax revenue to cover the bills. The scheme demanded fresh capital. Where do you find 12 billion Reichsmarks when your own industry is tapped out? You take it from someone else. March 12, 1938. German troops crossed the border into Austria, the Anschluss. In the frame, crowds cheering in Vienna. Behind the scenes, officials looting the Austrian National Bank. Austria possessed significant gold reserves, foreign currency, and heavy industrial assets. Germany seized every cent, but this was only the beginning. September 1938, the Munich Agreement. Germany takes the Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia. 1 year later, Hitler occupies the rest of the country. The footage shows tanks rolling into Prague. Czechoslovakia held massive gold reserves in the Škoda arms works. This was one of the most advanced weapons factories in Europe. Germany seized the entire production line. It got worse. September 1st, 1939, Germany invades Poland. This wasn't just a military move. Poland offered agricultural land, coal mines, and natural resources. Most importantly, millions of people for forced labor. The sound of boots on pavement echoed across the border. Germany seized everything. The Nazi economy was not just immoral. It was structurally designed to require conquest. It was a machine that needed constant fuel in the form of stolen territory. Without a new victim, the system would stall. As one historian noted, they had to invade a couple of countries just to keep the lights on. Hjalmar Schacht saw the end coming. He was the architect of the early economic miracle. By 1937, his reports to Hitler became desperate. He warned that the economy was overheating. He stated that the spending was unsustainable. He predicted a total financial collapse. Hitler ignored him. There was no turning back. January 7, 1939. This was the deadline. The first MIFO bills were coming due in just weeks. Hjalmar Schacht arrived at the Chancellery with a desperate report from the Reichsbank directors. The document was an ultimatum. It demanded an immediate halt to rearmament spending. It called for a balanced budget. Schacht warned that this was the only way to stop a total inflationary collapse. The German mark was on the edge of worthlessness. Hitler's response came on January 20, 1939. He did not negotiate. He fired Schacht as president of the Reichsbank. Schacht had built the Nazi economic machine, but he had also planted a time bomb inside it. Hitler's solution was simple. He would keep the bomb from exploding by constantly feeding the fire. He fed the machine with Austria. Then, he fed it with Czechoslovakia. Later came Poland, France, and the Soviet Union. The footage from this era shows a relentless march. The war was not just a product of ideology, it was a cold economic necessity. By 1939, the German state faced two choices. The first was total economic bankruptcy. The second was violent expansion. Hitler chose the latter. But this was only the beginning. MIFO bills were not the only source of revenue. The Nazi economy relied on other streams. These methods were even darker. When the Wehrmacht conquered a nation, they did not just occupy the territory, they stripped it bare. This was a process of systematic looting. The numbers tell the story. Gold reserves were seized from central banks. Foreign currency was confiscated from private safes. They packed art into crates. They dismantled entire industrial plants and shipped them back to Germany. The sound of heavy machinery being bolted to flatbed railcars became the soundtrack of the occupation. It got worse. The Nazi state began to treat conquered populations as a resource. It wasn't just gold and steel. It was human labor. At first glance, a military occupation. But in reality, a massive continent-wide extraction operation. The Reich was no longer a state, it was a predator. The machine required more fuel every day. There was no turning back.